Today, we're diving into the ancient world to talk about someone truly remarkable, Hypatia of Alexandria. I mean, we're talking about an absolute trailblazer, a scientist, a philosopher, one of the greatest minds of her time. But her story is also a tragedy, one that ends with a horrific act of violence that, honestly, we're still grappling with more than 1,500 years later. So, that's the big question, right? How does a celebrated scientist, a philosopher, end up being brutally murdered by a mob? Well, the answer, it's not straightforward at all. To even begin to understand it, we have to look at the city she lived in and the really dangerous mix of politics, religion, and reason she found herself navigating every single day. Okay, so to really get Hypatia, you first have to get Alexandria. We're talking about the late Roman Empire, and Alexandria, well, it wasn't just a city. It was the city, the intellectual capital of the entire world, a place just buzzing with incredible ideas. But, and this is a big but, it was also simmering with some seriously dangerous tensions. You've got to picture it. Alexandria was this incredible melting pot of knowledge. It's where Greek philosophy, ancient Egyptian wisdom, Jewish scholarship, and this new, really assertive force of Christianity, they all just smashed into each other. I mean, this was the city that inherited the legacy of the Great Library. It was without a doubt the center of the intellectual universe. But here's the thing. All that amazing intellectual freedom, it was incredibly fragile. The whole Roman Empire was changing, and Alexandria was turning into a battleground. You could feel it in the air. A massive storm was brewing. A clash between faith, politics, and reason was about to explode. And Hypatia? She was standing right in the middle of it. So you have to wonder, right, in this super complex, supercharged city, how did Hypatia rise to become one of its leading thinkers? I mean, how did a woman, in a world completely dominated by men, become so influential? Well, her journey began right at home with her father, Theon. And Theon wasn't just some random scholar, you know? He was a top mathematician and astronomer at the legendary Museum of Alexandria. He gave her an education that was frankly world-class, teaching her everything he knew about math and the stars. That was the foundation for everything that came next. But Hypatia didn't just stop there. She went way beyond that. She became a huge voice in a school of thought called Neoplatonism. Now, this wasn't just dusty, abstract philosophy. It was a whole worldview. The idea was that you could use logic and reason, especially mathematics, as a way to understand the divine. Think about that. For them, doing math was almost like a spiritual practice, a way to see the beautiful, hidden order of the universe. And this is what, for me, makes her so incredible. She wasn't just locked away in a library. No way. She had both sides of the brain working. On one hand, yeah, she was deep in the theory, writing commentaries on these insanely complex mathematical texts. But on the other hand, she was a practical, hands-on inventor. She was actually designing and building scientific tools, like the astrolabe, which people use to map the stars. It's that combination that's just, wow. So, you take that blend of brilliant theory and real-world skill, and what do you get? You get someone who's much more than just a scholar. You get a major public figure, a voice of reason with real, actual influence in the city. And this is so important to understand. Hypatia's influence wasn't based on religion or politics. It was built purely on her intellect. In a city that was tearing itself apart over religion, her lecture hall was one of the few places where everyone came together. Christians, pagans, Jews, they all showed up to learn from her. Her wisdom was so valued that she even became an advisor to the top politician in the city, the Roman prefect, Orestes. But that influence, that powerful voice of reason, well, it's exactly what put her on a collision course with that political storm we talked about. She was caught right in the crossfire. Okay, so the conflict in Alexandria basically boiled down to a power struggle between two very powerful men. You had Orestes, the Roman prefect. He was the government, the secular power. And then you had Cyril, the bishop of Alexandria. He was the religious authority, a really ambitious guy who wanted to make the church the ultimate power in the city. And where was Hypatia in all this? Right smack in the middle. Think about it. She was a pagan intellectual, a scientist, and she was a friend and advisor to Orestes, Cyril's political rival. To Cyril's more extreme followers, she became a symbol of everything they were fighting against: the old pagan world, logic, reason, Roman administration, the whole thing. This fight was never going to stay a war of words or political maneuvering. It was getting way too heated for that. That rising tide of religious extremism, it was about to crash. and the result was going to be absolutely horrific. So it all came to a head in March of 415. The tension just exploded. A mob, whipped into a frenzy by extremist rhetoric, hunted Hypatia down right on the streets of Alexandria. They dragged her from her chariot, took her to a church, and they brutally murdered her. Her body was then dismembered and burned. And we have to be clear about this. This was not a random act of violence. This was a targeted political assassination disguised as an act of faith. They killed her, yes. They extinguished that brilliant light. But in a deeply tragic irony, her murder is what guaranteed she would never, ever be forgotten. It's what turned her from a scholar into an icon for the ages. And just look at how people remembered her. Even people on the other side, so to speak, couldn't deny her impact. One of her own students, a man named Synesius, actually became a Christian bishop. And he wrote about her, calling her a wise and eloquent teacher who inspired him to seek out higher knowledge. Her mind, her teaching, it just transcended all that religious division. So, what is her legacy today? Well, over the centuries, her story has become this powerful symbol. She's seen as a martyr for philosophy and reason, a victim of religious extremism. She's become this incredible icon of female intellectual achievement. And maybe most importantly, her story is a chilling testament to just how fragile knowledge is and how quickly it can be wiped out by intolerance. And that really leaves us with one last, kind of unsettling question, doesn't it? Hypatia died over 1,500 years ago, but that battle, the fight for reason against extremism, that has never ended. So the question for us is, where do we see that same struggle playing out in our world today?